Hello students, welcome to this video tutorial on the best graph activity. So while we're working through this video, it's very important that you refer to this assignment sheet because that has all the data on it. It's very easy to use Google Sheets to create different types of graphs. So I'm going to take you through the first data set 1, sales figures for Gobbler Sweets. Okay, so let's make sure that we're on Google Chrome. And then let's click on Google Drive, or you can click on your link for Google Sheets. I'm going to go to Google Drive, and then I'm going to click New Google Sheets. Okay, so let's start with putting in the file name so we can access this file very easily over the next day or so. So in the top left-hand corner, let's type the best graph activity. Okay, make sure you hit enter so it locks that file name. Okay, in cell A1, let's put the title of the assignment again, the best graph activity, and then hit enter. Now remember, at any time, if you notice a spelling mistake or if you forgot to put in a capital letter, you can adjust it here in the text bar up here. Okay, sometimes it's easier to look up here. Many students neglect to look up here. That's where you can make your corrections. All right, let's click on cell C3 and let's type in your name by your first name, your last name, and class. And then hit enter. Okay, so let's adjust column A and B. Again, in a spreadsheet, we very seldom use column A and B. So I'm going to place my cursor between column A and B in this top row here. I'm going to get the double arrows and then I'm going to click and drag to the left. Make it about 1 centimeter wide or even less. And then I'm going to do the same for column B. I'm going to place my cursor between column B and C to get the double arrows. And then I'm going to click and drag to the left. Okay. All right, in cell C5, let's type in data set 1, colon, and the title for data set 1 was sales figures for Gobbler Sweets. So I guess this is a sweet shop, maybe a chocolate shop, I don't know. Sales figures for Gobbler Sweets. So we're going to create a data table. All of the graphs, they come from an established data table. So we have to create that first. Okay, and this is really good technique to know. That way, if you ever have a chart or a table of data, then you can make it look really professional. Okay, so let's start in cell C6. C6, let's type in year. And then what you can do is you can hit the tab key on your keyboard on the left-hand side of your keyboard. And what it will do is it'll bump it to the next cell over. So let's type in the first year, 1992, and then tab, 1993, tab, and then keep going. Until you get to 1998. Make sure you're typing in those years accurately. Now once we get to 1998, we don't really need to bump over to the next cell to the right, so we can hit enter, and it should drop down right underneath the cell that you typed year in. Now if it doesn't, you can just manually click on that cell, but once you hit enter, the spreadsheet should know that that's where you want to type in next. Okay, so the next row is called sales in millions. Now, if that is a little bit too long for that cell, then you'll have to open or expand cell C, or column C, I should say. And there it is. I've got lots of room now. Okay. All right. So if I'm in that cell, I should be able to hit tab and it should bump over to the next cell. So I'm going to carefully type in this data, 0.3, and then I'm going to hit the tab key, 0.4, tab, 1.2, tab, 1.7, tab, 2.9, tab, 3.2, and 4.1. Now carefully make sure you're looking at that data set on your sheet, on your assignment sheet. Okay. All right, so when we create the table, okay, we're going to notice that these columns are probably wider than they need to be. But let's create the column first. Let's create the table, sorry, first. All right, so we're going to start in cell C6. Be careful to start in this cell. You're going to click, you're going to hold the mouse button down, and then you're going to drag across and down so that you are covering up to this cell here, J7, where 4.1 is. It should highlight in a light blue, and then let go of your mouse button. So now you can see that this is the boundary of the data table. So please make sure that you don't have any other cells highlighted. If you do, just start again. You're going to start in cell C6, click and hold the mouse button down, and then drag down and to the right until you get to cell J7 where it says 4.1, and then you're going to let go. All right, it's very easy to create a border for your data table. Up here in the toolbar, you'll see here borders. Let's click the down arrow and simply choose all borders. Okay, and then what we can do is we can click outside of the table to have a look at what the computer's done for us. All right, that's a pretty good looking data table. Now, as I mentioned before we created the borders, you'll notice that columns D, E, F, G, H, I, J are a little bit wider than they need to be. So let's see if we can adjust those. So I'm going to try something here. I'm going to click on up here in the top row, and I'm going to click on column D, and I'm going to see if I can drag across. No, that's not going to work. Yes, okay. So what I did was I clicked where it says D, and then I'm going to hold the mouse button, and then I'm going to highlight. It should be able to let me highlight all of these columns like that. Okay, so I'm going to try it one more time. I'm going to start up here in the top row. Actually, it's above the top row, isn't it? This is called the header row. So I'm going to click and hold the mouse button, and I'm going to drag across so I can highlight all of these columns together. Then I should be able to right mouse click, and I should be able to get this menu pop up. Now you have to use right mouse click, not the normal left mouse click. All right, so what I'm looking for, let's see, I'm looking for resize columns D to J. So I'm going to click on that. I'm going to normal click, left click on that. And right now they're set to 100. So I'm thinking, well, it should be less than 100. I don't think it needs to be half of that, but let's try 70. And then click OK. And then, what do you think? Is that okay? Is that too skinny? If it's too skinny, if you feel that it's too skinny, you can right click again and resize columns, and then you can make it 75. Okay, or you can make it 80, or you can make it 65. Whatever you think is going to work, just give yourself a little bit of breathing room in case when we change the font is a little bit wider. Okay, so let's click off of that. Now the great thing about Google Sheets is that you don't have to keep saving. Okay. All right, so let's make this data set stand out. So let's highlight all of this, all of the table, and let's click bold. Okay. All right, so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click from cell D6. I'm going to hold the mouse button down, and I'm going to highlight all of this data, not the labels, but the data. And then I'm going to center this data here. Up here, the Align button. Let's click the down arrow and choose Center Align. Okay, that looks pretty good. All right, so now for the exciting part. So let's make the graphs. Now the great thing about creating the graphs on the computer is obviously you don't need paper, you don't need a ruler, you don't need your marker set or your pencil crayons, and we're gonna let the computer do most of the work for us. Okay, so let's highlight the entire table. Make sure that you're not leaving anything out, but at the same time, make sure that you're not highlighting any extra cells. All right, let's go up to Insert from the top pull-down menu, and let's go to Chart. Insert Chart. So let's click on that. Now the great thing about Google Sheets is it actually gives you a recommendation of the type of graph that you should be using. But I want you to kind of ignore that for now, and let's go to chart types. So whenever they say chart, they mean graph. Whenever I say graph, the computer means charts, okay? All right, so down here, we have a number of options to choose from. So the first type of graph that we're going to do is we're going to do a line graph. We're not going to do a rounded or a smooth line graph. We're going to do just a normal line graph. Okay, so we're going to click on that. I don't think we need to touch any of these. Okay, but before we ask the computer to create it, let's go to customization. Let's click on customization. Now there are a number of things that we can customize. So the first thing I want you to look at is the title. So sales in millions versus year. So what we're going to do is we're going to retype that as sales figures for, Gobbler Sweets. Okay, because that's what the name of the data set was. Okay, sales figures for Gobbler Sweets, and I got that right from the assignment page. Okay, so for something like this, where it's just a single line graph, we don't really need a legend. Here's the legend here, which is cool. You can keep it in, but we really don't need it. So what we can do is we can choose none for no legend. Okay. All right, so I forgot to say, back here when we inputted the title, okay, we can change the size of it. So if you feel that this is a little bit too big, and sometimes the title is very long, so you can adjust this right from here and make it just slightly smaller. Okay, so we can change the font here to some degree. Okay, so you can choose a font that you like. I'm going to choose something called Tahoma. Okay. All right, we're going to keep the background white because we're going to print on a black and white computer, black and white printer, I should say. All right, so for these, we're going to ignore these for now, but you can click on them to see what they do. All right, so here's the next most important part, is the y-axis and x-axis label. So at first it's set to axis horizontal, so that's this right here. The horizontal axis label we have here is year, and that's fine because that's right from the table. Okay, the y-axis, the x-axis should be year. All right, we can bold it if we like. Okay, now these are the labels here, the x-axis labels, but I'm going to keep them unbolded. Okay, you can slant them if you like. This is slant for this, and I'm going to kind of use my slider and go down. Okay, so you'll notice something here is that this is not really good. We don't really want it to read 1993.5. Like we never think of years in that way. We have 1996.5. So I really need you to watch for this kind of error here. So we can fix this by going down to grid lines, major grid lines. So right now we've got 5 major grid lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay? So what we can do is we can adjust this and maybe try 6. So sometimes this is trial and error. I'm going to try 6, and then I'm going to see if this kind of stretches out this x-axis. Now you can see that we have all of the years represented, and we don't have any decimals in the years. So 6 was a good choice. Now if you play around, if you go to 4, then you get something like this. And then if I went up to, let's say, 7, 7 would also work. Okay? But I'm going to stick with 6 here. I've got all of the years from my data table represented here. Now, if I want to, I can put in some minor grid lines, okay, so that I do have half years, but that's not really very helpful because from my data table, it was always on the year. So in this case, I don't really need any minor grid lines. Okay, let's see if there are any other options. Okay, so this looks pretty good. So what I can do is if I scroll down, I can actually change the line thickness here to make it stand out. So I can make it 4. Don't make it too thick because then it just kind of is it's too thick. It just kind of takes away from the ability to read the graph easily. Now what you can do is you can choose a point size, so you can make those points stand out a little bit more. Okay, and again, don't make them too large so it kind of looks cartoony. Okay, choose a good size. Or you don't have to have the size, you can just have none. I'm just going to choose 7 just for the fun of it. Okay, all right. So then what we have to do is we have to go back up here, and then now that we've adjusted everything for horizontal, now let's adjust things for vertical. Okay, vertical. So now we're talking about the vertical axis here. Now you notice here that it goes up 1.25 and then 2.5. Again, this is not very good. So what I can do is I can go down here to the grid lines. And let's see if 6 will work. Let's change this to 6. Do I get nice even numbers here? And that's really what I want, right? If I chose, let's say 9, see, then I've got these weird numbers here. So you got to find a number that works so that we've got nice clean numbers that kind of fit your data. Okay? All right. So if I want some minor grid lines might be helpful in reading these numbers. So because I'm going from 0 to 1, it's nice to have, let's say, 5 grid lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's hard to see. Maybe 4 grid lines. So you got to think of a grid line that's going to help us read this data a little bit more. Okay? So you can add those grid lines, those minor grid lines, if you like. You can change the color, but I suggest that you kind of keep it nice and soft in the background. Okay, so when we are ready, we can click Insert. So let's click Insert, and there we go. You should be able to click on that graph and move it around right underneath the data table. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that we kind of reduce the size of it because we're going to create 3 other graphs for this data set. Okay, so that's pretty good looking line graph right there. Okay, now if there's anything that you need to adjust, you should be able to click on this to edit it, or let's see, there are some options here, or maybe can we double click on it? What happens if we double click? So if we click here, quick edit mode, it doesn't seem to be doing anything. Okay, so my suggestion is if you create the graph and it doesn't look right, you just delete it and go through the process again. That's what I would do. I think it's much faster that way. Okay, so let's click off of that graph. All right, so let's set up our next graph. So we go through the same motion, okay? We start in cell C6, we drag down to cell J7, we highlight only the data table, we go up to Insert, we go down to Chart, and this time, when we go to Chart Types, we're going to go down and look for a bar graph, okay? So I think for this one, a vertical bar graph probably works better, but you can try a horizontal bar graph as well. Here they call it a column graph, okay? So let's click on that, and again, let's go to Customization. Okay, so let's change the title. Let's be consistent in our title in all 3 of our graphs. So we typed in sales figures for Gobbler Sweets, okay? Spelled Gobbler wrong, Gobbler Sweets. And then I think I used Tahoma font. Now again, you can choose a different font as long as you stay consistent with what you chose before. Okay, if you feel that this font is too big, I think the last one I used 14 for my title. Okay, and again, we can take off the legend. If you like the legend here, that's fine, but I'm going to take it off. I'm going to choose none for the legend. And let's go down here. Okay, so let's check these. So I've got my horizontal axis here. I've got my year, and I've got all of my years represented. I don't have any 0.5s or funny numbers for the years, okay? So that's pretty good, okay? And then let's see if I can explore some other things here. Now again, you can explore these. You can click on it and then take it off later. You can change the color of the bars here. And I think that's about it, but I can keep it blue because I used blue in the other one, so I might as well just keep it consistent. Okay, so let's go back up and let's check now the vertical axis, the left vertical axis here. So I've got my sales in millions, which is fine. And again, I've got these funny kind of intervals going up. So let's go down to grid lines and let's change that. Remember, you always got to be looking at these numbers. Don't just automatically take what the computer suggests. All right, so for the major grid lines, let's choose 6. I think I used last time, so I get the nice clean numbers 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the last one I chose 4 minor grid lines. Is that right? 4 minor grid lines. And again, we want to keep it consistent. Okay? All right, let's see. What other options are there? Nothing that we need. I don't think we want to mess with this. Okay, so let's see. I've got my main title. I've got my y-axis title and legend. I've got my x-axis title and legend. I mean, not legend, scale. Looks good. So let's click Insert. All right, so let's move this graph. Oops, sorry. I can undo here. Let's click on this graph and let's see if we can move it over. All right, now I want to make it about the same size as the previous graph. There we go. Let's see if I can just get it in line better. Okay, that looks pretty good. So I've got my line graph and I've got my bar graph. So there's one more graph that we're going to experiment with using Google Sheets. So let's click on that data table again. Let's highlight that data table. Let's go to Insert and let's go to Chart. Okay, let's go to Chart Types and let's scroll down and we can go to the pie chart or the circle chart. Now you can choose this flat circle chart or you can choose this 3D pie chart, which looks pretty cool. I don't think it gave us any 3D options for the other graphs, so let's have some fun with this. Let's click on 3D pie chart. And again, we don't touch any of these things. Let's go to customization. And again, we know that we have to change the title. So it's going to be sales figures for Gobbler Sweets. And if I remember correctly, I reduced the size of the font to make it 14. Okay. All right, now in this case, having a legend is really, really helpful. So I'm going to keep the legend on the right. Okay, that's probably the best place for it. You can experiment with these things, and sometimes they don't always look very good. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep it on the right. That way I get all of the years here. All right, so the font, I believe I've been using Tahoma. So again, you be consistent with the font that you're using in all three graphs. The background I'll keep white. Now here, this is very interesting here, is that the label on each slice, you can actually have some choices here. You can actually have the actual value from the data table, which is interesting, or you can have it as percentage. So you can choose. You can keep it as a percentage because that's really what's good about a pie graph is that it kind of shows the comparison between the different slices. So if you have the percentages there, it might be very helpful. Okay. You can have a border here if you want. No, maybe not. Sorry. And the donut hole, I don't think we get a choice of the donut hole. Okay. All right, so we don't have an x-axis and a y-axis, so we don't have to worry about that. We don't have to worry about grid lines, so this might be ready to go. So let's click on Insert. Let's try to reduce the size of that pie graph, and let's try to move it into position underneath the other two graphs. Okay, so there we go. So we've got the three graphs here. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make this one a little bit smaller. Okay, so we've successfully created a data table and we've successfully created three different types of graphs, a line graph, a bar graph, and a circle graph. Okay, all right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on cell A1 and then I'm going to go Control A on my keyboard. Control is the bottom left hand button on your keyboard and we'll hold that down while you while you press A, and that will highlight the entire sheet. So what you want to do at this point is you want to set your font. Okay, now this font doesn't have to be the same font as your graphs, or it can be. So I can choose Tahoma for the entire project. Okay, and that way this font matches the graph, but it doesn't have to. Okay. All right, so choose a good font that's easy to read. Again, you don't want to choose something that's difficult to read. So let's click in cell A1. A1 is where your title is. Remember, it's up here. So let's increase the font of the title to 12. Let's bold it. Let's click on your name in cell C3 and let's italicize it. And let's click on the label here or the title of data set 1 in cell C5 and let's bold it. Okay, so now we've got everything standing out here. All right, so if we go back to our assignment page, so let's look at what's expected of us. Okay, so we have a data table, we have 3 graphs, and we need a conclusion. So the conclusion is this. We need to determine which graph is best suited for each data set. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my sheet, and I've got a little bit of room here. So I'm going to click in this cell here. All right, so which graph is best suited for this data set? Okay, so that's the question, and I'll make it italics. Let's see, I can click off of that cell, and I can click back in that cell, and I can click italics. All right, so I don't expect a long answer here, so this is how your answer is going to start. The something 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 graph is best suited for this data set because, and when you're typing in your answer, number one, it doesn't have to be a long answer, and number two, I don't want you to have this long sentence that keeps going on, because what we're going to do is we're going to print this page, and there is a borderline of how far you can go. So if you feel that this is already kind of getting to the edge, you can click down here and continue typing. So what goes in this blank? Well, you have 3 choices. You have the line graph, the bar graph, and the circle graph. It's got to be one of those 3 graphs is best suited for this data. So how do you answer this question? Well, the secret is at the very beginning of the assignment page, right here. So we have the 3 types of graphs. The line graph shows how something changes over time. The bar graph compares similar items. And the circle graph compares different parts of a whole, so like a fraction. So which one of these 3 is this data set representing? That's how you answer this question. Okay, you use these definitions to prove your opinion. Okay, so it shouldn't take you very long. Again, I'm not expecting a huge answer. I'm expecting you to choose one graph and give me the explanation. Demonstrate to me that you understand the difference between these 3 graphs. Okay, so you can pause and you can take a few minutes to think about that. And then you can come back and I'll show you just a few more things before you go on to data set 2. Okay, so you're back. You've completed the data set 1 with your answer here. Remember, we've got our data table, we've got the 3 graphs, and we've got the conclusion. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go to File, and we're going to go down to Print. We're not going to print, but we're going to click Print, and we're going to make sure that we're on Landscape here. Okay, so make sure you're on Landscape. You don't need to touch this. It's automatically set to the right paper size. And then what we want to do is we want to click on No Grid Lines. Okay, so I'm going to click on No Grid Lines here. This is very important, No Grid Lines. I'll show you why it's important. So I'm going to not click on No Grid Lines. And when I click on Print, it's going to give us a print preview of what your page is going to look like. So, a couple things, okay? First of all, I don't want to have all of these cells highlighted because it kind of distracts from my wonderful graphs. So I'm going to cancel. All right, I'm going to go back to File, Print. I'm going to click on No Grid Lines, and then I'm going to click Print. Okay, so I only want to go this far and get the print preview. Here's what you're looking for. You're looking to make sure that your entire data set 1 fits on one page. So in other words, this graph is not hanging off the edge. This graph is not past the borderline of this page. So you see here that my entire assignment for data set 1 fits perfectly on one page. Now, if you find that your graphs are a little bit too big, then of course you can cancel and then you can adjust the sizes. But it looks like I've actually got a little bit more room to play with, so I might try to expand or increase the size of my graphs, and then we'll see what kind of difference it makes. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to increase the size of my graphs just slightly just slightly. Let me bring this one down. And let's see if I can increase this one just slightly. Okay, so I've made some fine adjustments by making each graph a little bit bigger, a little easier to read. Now let's see. Let's see if I still stayed within the boundaries of a page. Let's go to print. Let's go to landscape and let's go to print. And let's see, did I stay within the boundaries of the page? Oh yeah, I still have a lot of room. But you know what? I'm not going to push my luck. So I'm going to stop right there. Okay, so we're not ready to print. I want you to now complete data set 2 and 3 on your own using the same techniques. Now you can always review the video in case you forget how to do something. Okay, that's why the video is there. But I'm just going to get you started on data set 2. So what I want to do is I want to set it up exactly the same way. So what I can do is I can click and drag on cell A1, and then I could kind of highlight all of this area up to the data table. I can go to edit, copy, and then it will kind of be highlighted in this broken line. And then I'll come down here. Now I don't want to start a new sheet. I just want to continue on to this sheet. So let's say I'm just going to pick randomly cell A41. I'm going to click in A41 and I'm going to go to edit, paste. So here's where my next data set is going to start. But here's what I want to check. I want to go to File, Print. I want to check Landscape. And I want to make sure that the next part of the writing is on the next page. So you see how when I pasted that, the best graph activity, it actually went to the next page. And that's what I want. I want data set 2 to be on the next page. Well, let's say if it was over here. So let's say if I didn't paste it there, if I undo, and I pasted it right here, okay? And then when I went to look at it, File, Print, and I saw that, hey, this shouldn't be here, okay? You can cancel. You can undo the paste, and then you can place it a little bit lower. So if I place it in the next cell below and I go Control V, or if I go Edit, Paste, and then I go to File, Print, Landscape, Print, and then I look at the first page and oh, this is still in here. Okay, so I needed to bump it down one more. So I'll go Cancel, I'll go Undo, and then I'll click on the next cell down, and then I'll go to Edit, Paste. So this is just trying to get it lined up so that this part will start on a new clean page. So let's go to File, Print, Landscape, Print, and then let's have a look. Let's make sure on page 1 I don't have that there. And then if I use my slider, I go down to page 2. Perfect. All right, cancel. Okay, so the best graph activity, I need to start with the title. I need to have your name on it. And this, I'm going to adjust. I'm going to click in cell C44 for me. And I'm going to delete this. And data set 2 is called Different Ways Students of Class 7D Get to School. Okay. Then what I want you to do is I want you to create the data table. Okay, you may have to expand the cells. Remember for the first set, we made the cells or the columns quite narrow, but you may have to widen them up again. That's okay. Okay, remember how to do, just rewind the video to see how to remember how to do that. All right, so at this point, the video tutorial is over. So I've taught you everything you need to know. I need you now to complete data set 2 on page 2, and then progress to data set 3 on page 3. Again, at any time, fast forward through this video, find the spot that you need to review if you need to review. All right, I'm looking forward to seeing your completed projects. This is a big project, but it's very exciting. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.